This is some exciting stuff, guys. We just got the notification that something special has arrived. Here it is. Welcome back, guys. Nick here. Wanted to do a brief intro to this video before I get into talking into the weeds of today's topic, being Kentmere 200. I just wanted to share with you guys something I've been doing for my YouTube projects. On my website here, which has been linked below in all of my previous videos, you can find a link to this YouTube project section, find photo companions for all of my videos. So for example, this is my 4x5 video, and I have all of the full-size images featured in the video for you guys to take a look at, full size as opposed to me showing them on screen. I will still show them on screen, but that way I know that everyone can kind of see them in their full glory and not worry about YouTube compression or any other issues depending on the device you're using or anything like that. So feel free, as you're watching along with this one, there will be a page live in the coming minutes here, actually, as I edit for this video, featuring all of my test shots, not only from Kentmere 200, but all of my Kentmere 400 sample shots that I reference and Kentmere 100 sample shots that I reference. So feel free to take a look at those as you watch along with this. That way you can get an idea of what we're all looking at. As I'm sure you're all well aware, Kentmere has come out with their 200 speed film, Kentmere 200, another black and white film to round out their lineup. And it's very exciting. The announcement was about a week ago today, right at 9 a.m. And by 9:10, I had an order on the way. So I've rushed through and gotten some pictures taken with the new stuff, and I'm excited to show you guys some of my results. I've got some comparisons to line up against some Kentmere 400, some Kentmere 100 as well. And ultimately, I'm trying to decide what the next black and white film that I'm going to be sticking with is. Before this, I was pretty close to pulling the trigger on a bulk roll of Kentmere 400. Now, this new film came out and has sort of challenged my thought on that. So what I'm going to be doing is going through my process, showing you guys some of the results I got, and comparing those to previous results I've gotten on other Kentmere films, and see if this is the film to line up my black and white work with. That being said, I'm looking for this as an all-around black and white film, whereas I have other film stocks that I lean to that are more associated with specific looks. For example, Frania P30 for me is when I really want that high contrast if I'm shooting midday, but it's a very limiting stock. Something like HP5 generally fits the bill of that pretty well as well. I do shoot HP5 plenty often, but sometimes I want something a little more casual, something I can less worry about. I found that I can still get pretty great results out of Kentmere 400 that rival in a lot of ways what I can get out of HP5. So with that being said, I've got this is one of the sample images up here on the screen. And I believe this is tested with a green filter. But I have a full 3 rolls I shot. I have one more sitting in the fridge waiting. And I've shot them through 3 different cameras so we can get a good look at what sort of different exposure methods can do, and different filter tests and different pieces of glass, so we can get a really rounded up idea of what this film looks like. I know there's been a lot of reviews already, the early reviews that have come out. I'm going to not be delving too much into the technical level of things. That's not my expertise. I instead will recommend you check out Shaka1227, probably flashing if I got that number wrong. His video is an incredible breakdown. He always does a great job of breaking down these things. His series on Phoenix was what made that film usable for me. So I'm going to recommend his video on this stock as well if you'd like to get more into the nitty gritty and sort of the chemistry of things. I'm more so looking at this as far as my workflow goes, which involves using the DSLR scanner back there. That's the Pentax K1 with a Schneider f2.8 enlarger lens, and inverting via Negative Lab Pro. How that works in my setup, as opposed to, I don't do much darkroom printing these days as much as I'd like to. I share most of my work digitally as well. That being said, I do have some prints that I make, So something like pixel peeping is pretty valuable to me when I'm looking at making prints as big as, 20 by 20 or in that range. All of these, by the way, were scanned, like I said, via my DSLR scanning setup, and they have been inverted using Negative Lab Pro. I tended to keep all of them pretty consistent in settings. I like using the Fine Art Satin Pure setting, Cine Rich, Lab Sharpness, and in some cases I was adjusting the dark point, brightening up the darks, and then I actually compensate down by lowering the black point. That I find helps me retain a lot of details in the shadows and fine details that would have gotten lost. For example, if you just turn the darks down, you lose all the detail in the leaves behind the car. Let's see if I can show you that. Yeah, you see that little pocket of dark right here. When you bring the darks down, you lose that. So I bring those up and then I compensate down with the blacks to remain contrast, but I'm going to cancel that so my settings can stay the same. Right off the rip, this first roll, well, this is actually the third roll I shot, but the first roll I'm going to be showing was shot with the LX, my Pentax LX, and the 50 f1.4 HD FA lens. That's the brand new lens that they came out that mirrors the 90s design, but features modern coatings. I have a lot of thoughts about this lens, and frankly, I think it's probably one of the best buys you can get from Pentax at this time. So I have a full video in the works on that, but what you need to know is that it is an awesome lens. It's incredibly sharp. I took pretty much all of my work in Utah on that lens. And for a test like this, when you want to get as much as you can out of a film, putting it through something like the LX with a really sharp meter and a really sharp lens, it pretty much gives it the best fighting chance of looking as good as possible. You can see here the Forerunner is in great detail. I mean, you can even make out the little scratch on the body panel. Grays look good. The blacks are nice and rich. There is a pretty considerable amount of grain. So jumping the gun a little bit, I want to cut to a shot I took on the Hasselblad. Now, I believe this was with no filter, whereas this might have been the no filter one. So we'll do this for reference. These leaves here, this is at base ISO, 200 ISO on the Kentmere. I want to go ahead and compare this to a similar shot that I took on Cinestill XX Kodak 5222. That is this shot. Now, these are both 200 speed films. I shoot XX at 100 ISO, and the grain is considerably finer. That is, there. I had no contest there. We are working with medium format, so you do have that kind of pop. Both of these were shot on the Hasselblad 500 cm with the 80 millimeter C lens, so the older style lens. The detail's great. The grain on the Cinestill is great. But if we're looking at the Kentmere, you can see that it actually holds up very well, even in some of these shadows. And in fact, what I'm going to do here is see just how well they'll hold up. Now, this isn't what I would put in usable territory. This is more an extreme case scenario. That being said, for something like a Kentmere film that is and on the lower price range because of the lower silver content, that sharpness is impressive. This little section here, you can see how sharp it all is. In fact, if I can zoom in even more, I mean, we're pretty zoomed in now, kind of really pixel peeping. Now we're seeing pixels. Yeah, that's when we're going to back out. That's how far in we were able to go, and that looks very good to me. I'm certainly impressed with that. That's medium format though, so back to 35. I was trying to shoot a lot of contrasty scenes so we can get like darks versus brights here, and here's sort of darks. I found that this film doesn't really get into the black point as much, even with my fairly contrast leaning editing style. I really kind of had to push it down, and then you start losing detail. So it doesn't retain a ton of detail in the darks. Again, this is with my setup particularly. But it does look nice in the highlights. All of this foliage this time of year is really just bright and popping green. It shows really well. I mean, these leaves look great, even though they're kind of out of focus, out of set. This is where we start seeing some grain happening. Again, we're on 35 here, so that's kind of to be expected. I want to get into the next set of pictures here because they're a series of comparisons that I did without a tripod. And I have the notes written down here. So I'm just going to go through and talk about what I did for each one of these shots. This first shot was with no filter at base ISO, metered through the Pentax. Pentax LX shoots aperture priority, but I did write down what it was telling me it was shooting, and that was at 125 or 125th of a second. No filter at f8. And you can see where it's most noticeable is probably in the sky on some of this foliage around here and on the building. The darks hold up incredibly well. Does look very good. The next shot was with a yellow filter. Now I use all the Koken system filters. So this is with a Koken yellow. And you can tell a little bit that the building is a hair darker. Now these were all edited with the same settings in Negative Lab Pro. Linear deep on this one, lab sharpening, and I didn't mess with any of the sliders, fine art satin pure. Now you can see a little darker in the shadows here. The sky is showing a little bit of a sign of getting darker as well. Now this is bright, clear blue skies. This was like midday, right around 12. And even some of the foliage, if you notice, got very dark very quick. This is just with a yellow filter that cuts about a third of a stop on. On the third photo, we have the orange filter, again, f8, this time at 1/60th of a second. Difference is not as considerable, frankly. I have a whole video in the works comparing color filters on black and white film. First results were so-so. But getting into the red filter is really where the big difference struck. I think this film has a pretty cool look on the red filter. This was at f8 and somewhere between 1/60th and 1/30th of the second. The camera was kind of bouncing between. For those that are familiar, the LX does have a self-correcting shutter. So with that, it can kind of compensate mid-shoot to get the exposure just right based on shifting lighting and kind of in-between speeds. So it is a very accurate system. If we side by side this, you can look at the sky and the building as say where would be the key points. Darker sky, darker building here, and obviously all this foliage, it just pops way more with the red filter. Very noticeable. Next up is where I started messing around with ISO. So this is no filter. The ISO is set to 160, which I think is really interesting because you get almost the same effect as the red filter without the diminishing skies. So that's something that'd be interesting to note. You do also get, if you notice, obviously the red of the brick got very dark and the building remained, where it was shadowy, it got very dark, and where it was bright, got much brighter, whereas the ISOs kind of kept that much more even, actually sharper contrast. This was at 160 ISO, so 1/25th of a second f8 compared to the original frame with at base ISO. Next up, we've got, I dropped down to 125 ISO, and a similar effect. You can see not much of a difference. In fact, the exposure times were pretty much the same between all of these. I think a lot of it came down to how the LX corrects or compensates with its shutter. So these two are fairly similar, and that's to be expected. They're no more than a third of a stop different. We're now into 100 ISO, which let's compare this to. So this is base ISO of 200, and this is 100 ISO. Similar effect to the red filter again, just a significant increase in contrast. Something to note as well is all of this was developed D76 1:1 per their data sheet, which puts it at, I believe, 8 minutes and 45 seconds for development time. This next shot was at 80 ISO. And that's the last of this comparison. I'll go quick between. So much like any other film, it can handle overexposure really well. And I actually think it gives it a very pleasing look. Certainly, if you're not wanting to buy Frania P30 and you shoot this stuff at 80 ISO, you can get a pretty similar look for probably half the cost, which is something that may be worth looking into on other formats. Next, I got another filter test here. Now this one was a little more rudimentary. We have no filter. And again, the darks are falling off very hard here. That's something that, again, we can correct for, but not without compromising the remainder of the image in a way that I find kind of unfavorable. So all these are the same settings as well. This is at f4, 125 or 125th of a second. Yellow filter, same deal, same exposure settings. And orange drops down to a 60th of a second. And we can see some of the contrast increase as we get into the red filter here compared to even the orange is pretty extreme. And then this is something I'm messing around with now is a green filter. And I actually really like the look of this. Really makes the green foliage pop a lot more. It's definitely a look I want to mess around with. And I'm glad I did it with this film because of what it was doing to some of the foliage we were seeing earlier on in the roll. Just like this pop, I think that green filter emphasizes it and keeps it in a really good place. The detail that holds up here is pretty great. Gonna acknowledge there's some dust specks in these pictures. These are test rolls. None of these are really going for the portfolio or probably gonna be made prints out of. So I'm not really too obsessed with getting these little specks of dust out. Anyone who DSLR scans knows the struggle. And just to get sort of an idea of the film, this doesn't make a huge difference to me. So these look really great on these fine details as well. A couple interior shots here. I'm actually a really big fan of this shot. I know I was just talking about these not being a portfolio shot, but this I think has potential. I really like how this looks. And I believe this is with the green filter on because these plants were green. And not a huge difference, if anything, sort of what is green and kind of bedded in light pops just a little bit more. Now we're getting into rolls taken on my Leica M3. This is with the dual range Summicron 50 f2. I think I've got some issues with my camera, so we're going to kind of breeze through these. There's not much to see here. This, I think, was just bad metering. This is the day I opened the package. It was pretty overcast, and this is a room interior with a lot of windows and not a lot of light fixtures. This looks really good. This flag is white and red, so that's what these kind of colors do. Very good. I certainly wouldn't be able to parse out that this is a Kentmere film from this. This just looks like a well-exposed film shot. And it looks like I might have given it a little too much light on the red. So even then, these are pretty drastically underexposed and kind of messed up. We can pick up a pretty good deal of detail in the highlights, which I think is pretty impressive. Now we're into the Hasselblad roll. Again, if you want to check out more of these pictures, my website does have all of these for your viewing pleasure. But we're looking at the Hasselblad roll now, and similar shot to the first one on the Leica because I took them back to back at the same time of day. Somehow much better exposed. And I mean, for an interior shot on a 200 ISO film, it's pretty good looking. I think that it holds up very well. Similar shot again here. This is no filter, so we can compare it to this shot. These are really the same shot, just on medium format versus 35. And if we zoom in here, that's what the 35 looks like on this sort of area is what I'm looking at. Let's go to the 120. This is what it looks like there. I think that this film, honestly, is a great medium format film. I really enjoyed the 120 results. And this is more of a texture thing. I wanted to see how it would hold up with some of these details. It's kind of Japanese maple. This is a purple variety with a couple green shoots coming out of it. This is the inside, and this gray tone that it turned the reds is very pleasing to me, or purples, I should say, because that's kind of what they are. And I'm actually a really big fan of this shot. I think it looks really good. I'd be curious kind of see what the lights do. Yeah. Again, we can see a good bit of flexibility in this film, though. This is just how I edited it together. But another one, this is looking upwards at some hanging tree of some variety. And the detail here is great. I mean, it's 6x6 negative, so it's of course going to have detail. When you're paying $6-7 a roll, it's pretty good to have, especially when the other options are like Fomapan. Looking at some of these, I think this film trades punches with Cinestill Double X or 5222, however you refer to it as. This the detail's really great, especially in medium format, and the price is pretty tough to beat. This is another filter test, so I believe this is no filter, green, maybe an orange here. I didn't write these ones down. I was pretty excited to just shoot pictures of stuff with the new film. Now I've got some of the Kentmere 100 shots up here, and keep in mind this is a film that I don't think really impressed me too much. These are scans from back in October, following my trip to Utah. This was the last roll that I shot on that trip, and this is what was left in the camera after the and it did get x-rayed, though I don't think it affected the results. Yeah, the detail is there. I don't think it's anything to write home about. I think compared to something like T-Max 100 for a 100 ISO film, this is still pretty grainy. In fact, I think that the grain is pretty similar on 200. Now, we are zoomed in a good bit, but this is this is also with the LX with the same 50. The latitude is not great, but again, this was in Utah in October with bright sun. I know the last kick of summer they had there, so super contrasty. But a lot of these have fallen flat for me, and also not really my best work. I had shot about 30 rolls while I was there. I think I was starting to get a little burnt out. This one's pretty good. It might be a good comparison to look at. Let's see what we got here. For a 100 ISO film, I kind of expect more detail, less grain, and maybe I'm asking too much. Push comes to shove, Kentmere 100 is probably the bottom of the list for me. Seeing that I like the 200 results far more makes a lot of sense. Now we're looking at Kentmere 400 results, and I don't consider Kentmere 400. I consider Kentmere 400 to be probably one of my favorite black and white films. Just all around, if like I had to pick one for every and all occasion, I'd probably be tied between Kentmere 400 and HP5. If price was a factor, I think I'd probably lean towards Kentmere. That's not to say that HP5 isn't priced very competitively, just that it's a great value proposition. So this is on the Pentax LX with an older 51.4 and a yellow filter. The grain is considerably more than what is on the 200, but I think it's actually very pleasing. By the way, all of these are developed D76 1:1. That's done by my lab, Camera Center of York. Saw the picture of them earlier. If you're in the area, show them some support. They do an awesome job. So this is on the LX. This is on the Hasselblad Kentmere 400 in Utah. Again, I shot a ton of black and white, so that's what I have a lot of examples from. And I actually think this holds up a surprising level of detail, considering it was on like the same system. Brighter conditions in Utah, I was pretty much shooting at EV 18 the whole time, so f22 and 1/500th or somewhere in that range, pretty much the whole trip, which was bonkers to say the least. And the Hasselblad was having a light leak issue, if you can see that right there. But regardless, the detail in Kentmere 400, this is probably with an orange filter, I believe, based on the sky. Just great. And what I want to point out is the shadow detail. Now, I have some shadows kind of crushed on these. Even in here, there's still a ton of detail that can kind of be, at the very least, interpreted by a viewer, and it's not just gone to nothing. I don't know if Kentmere 200 would hold up in that scenario. So moving along, again, another situation. This is one where I did intentionally black this out, but if you notice the other side, this is still 6x6, just cropped down to 645. The shadow detail holds up here incredibly well as well. Again, with the orange filter, this past two shots were in Zion, for those curious, and this was in Brian's Head on the ride up there. They had a kind of fire a couple of years ago and still haven't had some recovery. And if you ignore the light leaking and whatnot, you can see the shadow details here, the contrast, just a very pleasing look from the Kentmere 400. Now going back into 35, this is Kentmere 400 in Bryce Canyon. Again, shooting like 1/1000th at f22 or something like that, or in that EV range. You can see just how much is held up in the shadows. It's a pretty long way before they start falling off. You can get a good amount of detail out of it. Even some of these more distant landscapes hold up very well. Now, there is a pretty considerable amount of grain. That's to be expected on a 400 ISO film. I find the grain on Kentmere 400 to be very pleasing, though. Something about it. Maybe that's just cope because it's so cheap and I can tolerate it. But I do think it actually looks good. It imparts a lot of character onto the shots that it's on. And when you're looking at it like this, it only kind of falls in this area, which has an almost haze effect, which I really like. Whereas what's kind of in focus is still clear. It's another shot, a similar shot. And what I wanted to point out here was, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but shadow detail and the latitude that 400 has. And similarly to the 200, some of the lights really pop, almost a halation effect, but not as much. And you can see sort of going from really bright, like directly in midday sun, to this shaded region. The transition is pretty stark, but works well. And I actually think that's part of where the grain comes in handy because it helps ease the eyes into those two sort of extremes. I am a big fan of Kentmere 400, if you couldn't tell. Similarly here, kind of got the same story. I encourage you guys to take a look at some of these pictures yourself and tell me what you think. The full-size scans are available. You can take a look and see how they stack up. Remember, everything D76, 1:1, stock times, some messing with color filters. Usually it can be indicated by the sky. I think for the most part, these were yellow filters, just because that's what I had on. This I know was a yellow filter in the LX with the 50 1.2 K series lens. So a little bit of an older lens, got some more character, less perfected. Some great details in the shadows. I love this dog. He's a great little guy. He was watching me take pictures around town here. Things hold up really well. Mixed lighting, I guess, is the term. Something else I wanted to show. These were two Kentmere 400 shots, pushed two stops through the Horizon panoramic swing lens camera. Does have a pretty severe light leak kind of around here, but we can just sort of see how well Kentmere 400 could hold up in these sort of interior lights. Granted, it's pushed two stops and through a pretty choppy camera. This is from a trip to Maine I did a couple years ago, and we were in a shopping mall. Everyone kind of knows what Kentmere 400 looks like at 1600 ISO, so I'm not going to waste too much time with this. What did I decide to do with my film purchasing? Because I needed to get some black and white film. Well, I just ordered a bulk roll of Kentmere 400. I stuck with the 400 in 35 at least because I found the results to be a little more consistent. I like how it holds up in the shadows more. Kentmere 200 has a really sharp shadow fall off, and if I want that, I already have a ton of rolls of P30 from Frania that I am a little more confident in shooting because I know how that film works with its quirks. That being said, when those rolls of P30 run out, and hopefully Frania keeps making more film, but if not, I am more than happy to get some 200 as well. In a pinch, I would certainly never say no to it. It is a great film. I highly recommend you give it a shot for the price that it's at. It is worth trying, even if you just want to support what they're doing over at Harman, making new film stocks, keeping our cameras loaded. It's some awesome stuff. I'm looking forward to whatever is next from them. I'm going to, again, encourage you guys to take a look at the website and see sort of these pictures for yourself. Comment down below what you guys think, how you think the film would hold up in your workflows, how you think of my comparisons here. Additionally, I know I touched on it a bit here as well, my scanning and inverting process. I do have a full video coming out on that. I kind of did that concurrently with this video. So keep an eye out for that. Again, I want to put a little thanks here at the end for all the people who have commented, subscribed, or interacted with the videos in any way. It seriously means a lot getting started doing this whole thing and trying to talk photography. It's great to see the support. Anything that you guys do is greatly appreciated. Even something as simple as, I believe, if you click the share button and copy the link, you don't even have to send it to anyone. Creator gets some credit. So even if it's not me, if it's another creator, that's fine. That's fine as well. Just show some support to the creators who you're enjoying. That being said, I will see you all next time.